my gosh, what if I don't get on live after I did this big sticker thing?
I'm obsessed. I love it. I love it. It's so good to see you. Yay. I'm so glad it worked. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm seeing some amazing familiar faces, some folks I haven't met in person yet, many of our friends from the Nook. So much fun. I think it's going to be fun. We're going to spend a little time together, hang out, talk quilts, which is like our favorite thing. If folks have questions, there's the chat, and there's always the Q&A section, and we're going to have a little open mic side of this as well. So if you want to turn your video on and show us one of your quilts, you'll be welcome to do that near the end as well. Yeah. Okay. Do you want to kick off, do you think, China? Are we ready? Ready to go?
We're ready. I just want to say, I think maybe it's a little bit like the Muppet Show, too.
Yeah,
That
I
vibe.
agree. The more vaguely chaotic we are, the more fun it'll be. I love it. I'm here for it. I'm absolutely here for it. So why don't you tell everybody what our concept here is, what your concept here is. I just hopped on board. I just said, yeah, I'm going to help. I'm going to go turn this light up a bit.
Okay. Oh, wow. I thought we were going to introduce ourselves first.
Yeah, we could do that. Let's do that.
Okay, sorry. I'm so like chaotic yet so like we need to do what's on the list.
I agree. That's a good idea. Do you want me to intro myself? I'll do myself first. So I'm Ian Capstick. I'm in Montreal, Chochiage. I am a storyteller and communicator by day and quilter by night, although I quilt at all times. I have been a polycraftual craftivist. I don't think I've ever said that out loud before, but I do tons of different crafts. I came to this world by banner making and poster making and sign making and stressing out over art direction and interior design and loving textiles. And when I found the medium of quilting, some magic happened. And I think this year was part of it. So I'm excited to talk about how my practice has grown over the past year. And I'm excited to talk about it with you, China, because we have very different practices. So yeah, so that's a bit of an introduction.
Yeah. Thanks, Ian. I'm excited to learn more about you too. Like I learned more even in your introduction. My name is China. I'm 57 years old. I'm reading off this thing, if it sounds strange, because I had to write it down. I live in Baltimore, and I was born in Baltimore, Maryland, but I grew up moving around, and I've lived in other cities too when I was with my daughter. I'm kind of known for radical parenting writing and all ages community building, but I also write all different things. I consider my original storytelling language to be quilting, which I learned from my great-grandmother. And I guess I was gonna to explain the concept of the sampler, which I'm so excited. It was something I really wanted to do, and Ian and I only like solidified this or created this like 2 days ago. So thank you for making it possible, Ian. And what it is, well, also thank you for us just jumping in and doing this, because we're going to start off with like reflecting on this last year in our quilting practice, which I just think is really cool way to end the year. But idea of the sampler, we're going to keep doing this, and it's not just going to be me and Ian. We're going to have guests, and they're going to show like a picture of their quilt and talk behind the scenes of like their quilt. And it's like kind of like an artist talk on the growth curve, because it's like I am interested in talking creatively and participating. Kind of, I've seen like a bunch of great artist talk this year, and I was like, oh, I want to talk to somebody too about what I'm doing. Like I want to have that exchange. I want to learn how to speak better, which is actually always a struggle with me. So I'm also going to just show up exactly as I am. And the concept we have for this is just like so relaxed, like kind of like the Muppet Show. No, not like the Muppet Show. Like kind of like an open mic night. like that. So yeah.
Exactly like that.
Yeah.
Right? A
Yeah.
bit chillax and fun because we're on Instagram Live and we'll take you into our practices, I guess, a little bit, sort of the why of the stitching as well as the how, if you want to get into that, and as well into your quilts. Because again, like I mentioned earlier, we will have a little open mic segment. We'll test it out. Maybe one of you wants to show us something. Maybe not. That's okay too. We'll fly by the seat of our paints, as it were, and we're going to be okay with that. We're calling it a minimum lovable product.
Yes. 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 Okay. So I
So I'm
got.
excited to hear about your quilts this year, China.
I made 2 quilts, which I feel on the Quilty Nook, there's a lot of people who maybe make more than 2 quilts for their year, but I feel like so good and so solid of having made 2 quilts. So last year I made 2 quilts. I finished 2 quilts. And before that, I never finished a quilt in my life. I started a quilt when I was 19 years old. After my great grandmother died, I inherited her fabric stash. And I have this like gorgeous velvet patchwork, sentimental, 95% done quilt my whole life. I have a problem with finishing things. So, so when I got, anyway, so, yeah, okay, I don't want to derail, but anyway, so that's why it's so exciting to me now that I'm a person who finishes quilts. And I feel like also I'm more in a quilting community, and that non-perfection is really stressed, or at least wait, can non-perfection be stressed? No,
Yeah.
it can, but I feel like non-perfection is helping me a person who finishes things. And so let's see, we're supposed to talk for like 7 minutes. I can either put on a timer. I forgot to put on, I have a timer.
It's okay. It's all good.
Thanks.
It's all good. We're chillaxed.
Okay. Oh my gosh, thank you so much. I feel so much better now. Okay, so my 2 quilts, the first quilt of the year, I put some pictures recently up on Instagram so you could see it better because I don't know how well this is going to work. But it's a quilt called Old Blood. And oh, there's my old underwear. Oh, we're going to jump right into
Showing us
it.
really well.
Yeah, this was a pair of underwear I saved from a long time ago. I don't know if I should do content warning for like women, old women, underwear, blood, okay, all that stuff. But yeah, once upon a time, I bled on this pair of underwear so much that I personally was astounded and impressed. And I'm also a pack rat and a fabric hoarder. So somewhere in my stash of like just weird things I'd saved, I found this old pair of underwear that was just like really stained with blood. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I remember when I kept that. And I found an old diaper that my daughter's 35 years old now, but when she was a kid and used cloth diapers and we lived in Santa Cruz, somebody came over our house who had an embroidery machine and they had their daughter's name embroidered on all the diapers. They left it at our house. It was a better quality diaper than my diapers, and I've always just like hold on to it. I was like, oh, cool diaper. A sock. I really like that sock, but I only had one. We learned how to patch stuff on the Quilty Nook. I patched my little old sock there. And well, this quilt is just really random things, random old things.
Beautiful.
That when I had come along far enough in my path as a quilter to think about organizing my stash. I'd never done that before. I always had one bag in the closet, my great grandmother's stash that I inherited, almost like my secret power. I did have a bag of vintage velvets that I've saved for 30 years. I haven't done anything with yet, but I'm thinking about using this winter. I'm a slow worker, but it wasn't until like the last 2 years in quilts. I've learned so much. So one thing I learned at the beginning of the year, I sorted out all the material I had and I got more organized, right? Which I actually need to do again. But in that, I made one pile of all the crappiest stuff, like just, I don't know, weird stuff, rags, old underwear, diaper, you know? And then when I was done sorting, I looked at that pile that was like the things that are like debatable. And I was like, I want to make a quilt with that. Like that made me laugh. That charged me up. That almost was like the meaning of my life. Like these materials, these working materials representing my life. And it's very much in the vein of my great grandmother's crazy quilt. Even though she was sewing from all the scraps of the clothes that she would sew people, it was just always sentimental story is what gets me, you know, even to the point, like she showed me the shirt her aunt sewed her when she was 8 years old, coming from Germany to Baltimore on the boat. Like when I was a teenager, she opened this chest, she showed me this incredible, like it was like dark, dark flannel, dark plaid flannel, and the inside was fitted to her body, and the outside was like billowy, and then had like black velvet around the neck and stuff. And I was really amazed by it. And then she said, "Do you want it?" And I said, "Yeah." So like I always like it's always been important to me, those stories. So in a way, this is just more like the working. This is not like the shirt I wore on the boat from Germany. This is like the good working fabrics of our life.
Yeah.
They're like kind of trying to just discard it and nothing. And then I was like, oh,
so much beauty in that almost discarded
yes,
thing that most people would throw away, but you held on to, and they're all in one place. Can you hold it up just a bit to see it again? I love it. Look at that. Oh, it's really fun.
and then I love hand quilting, so I get really intense about my hand quilting. But it's
Oh, that's beautiful in the back.
like scribbling too. Like it's a little, yeah, it's just. And so when I reflected back on my year with quilts, because both quilts were of I would say sentimental fabrics. That's what really got me to finish, because I started things like I started a snowball quilt. I'll experiment and play, but the motivating thing that would get me to finish, it had to be things with a story that were my kind of my story. For the first time this year, I went to reuse stores. Like in Baltimore, it's like Scrap in Durham. It's I wrote down the name of it because I never remember anything. It's some kind of scrap thing too. The Scrap Exchange, which is an amazing place. And you know, you could get like a big bag of fabric for $10. And so you kind of just keep stuffing the bag because you're just like, well, you have this bag, right? And they have bins. And I got really greedy. I feel like in both places. Like even somebody told me, you know, they were just like kind of like abundant universe, like China, there'll be fabric when you come back, you know. But there was this like weird greedy fabric part of me that like saw things were like nice and cheap, and I was just like, I want all the fabric. And I haven't used much of that fabric yet. I do feel good that I have a palette, because that's what I wanted. I didn't want to only be working in sentimental fabrics. I want a full palette, and some of it is in my second quilt. Like right, this part right here, that that Scrap Exchange. But still, to me, like when I see this, I think of the story, because I think of like I go to North Carolina to visit my parents. My mom came with me that one day. You know, I was blown away. My mom was not, because she had a different imagination of like what it would look like, you know? And I was so surprised that my mom didn't love it the same way I loved it, because she's a sewer. I mean, she loves fabric too. It's like when I look at that, like I kind of remember that whole thing. And then when I was visiting my mom, she gave me an old black leotard that she had done dance when she was a kid, that either my mom or my grandmother sewed it. I mean, she made, her mother or grandmother sewed everything, like coats, swimwear, you know. And that leotard had holes in it, so she gave it to me. And black became like a real special thing to me in this quilt that I thought brought it to me. Oh, I'm jumping into the second quilt I made this
Okay.
year. And
We're here.
in the end, this was called Bits of Summer because, you know, there's things I thought about. Like when I went to Amsterdam, which was a big trip this year, I got fabric in Amsterdam and I imagined making a quilt from my trip. I even had the name for it. It'd be called Keep It Moving because of all those bikes, you know? So there's like in this one quilt, there's different parts of like some concepts I had, but I don't follow through. But I just, in the end, when I just threw everything together, like whatever I had, and kept going to get to the finish line, you know, because in the beginning, this was just practice. This was from, I had the two fabrics. I had this shirt I found when I was visiting my cousin, and then I had an old scarf that was at my mom's house that nobody liked. I didn't like it. I really kind of wanted to throw it away, and that's why I decided to use it for, was it the mystery quilt? Where it was like, we cut we have two different fabrics, and we were cutting different shapes. It was like on the Quilty Nook with Zach. So this started exercise for fun. And then at a certain point, I kind of really didn't like it and was, again, to the edge of like kind of wanting to throw it away, which is like something you never, at least I never do, right? In quilting, you never throw anything away. You keep your little strings. You know, it's like, that's another story. But slowly it morphed. As I added the black, I started to really like it. And the phone's just sitting on the cat scratching post, but yet I feel like I can't move it. Wait a minute.
Oh, look at that. There's those additional fabrics at the top we're just catching an eye on now.
So this part came from a tablecloth that my mom sewed for my niece's college graduation the year before. So my mom has fabric at her house. Not as much as she used to, though, which always shocks me because I'm just like, we are people who have fabric, you know. But so I think that's why I used the piece from, like, even though I got this bag, that's the only piece I used from the scrap exchange because it kind of like echoed that. And it's just so fun. I mean, I do like it for the artistry of just making different choices and just kind of a feeling like a poetry or a poem. That's why I do want to have lots of fabrics to play with it. But looking back, I guess the big lessons of this year, the things that kept me going were personal. They also had no plan. Like every time I sit down, it's new. If I thought ahead of a pattern, it's like I just can't. My attention can't stay that way. I have to be able to just change, like feel how it feels, and just do something. That's what keeps me going. That getting fabric at places, even if it's inexpensive, doesn't thrill me as much as when I find fabric for free or in my life, else's life, or even like a shirt found at the rest stop. Like that's more exciting. And that made me reflect on how much I'm learning about fabric. Things like in the Quilty Nook, I'm learning about the problem we have in society of like landfills filling up with new clothes that are all dumped. And that's what I was thinking. Like I was thinking in this really small way, I'm learning how to manage something that I touch and be like responsible for these things in my life. You know, I mean, there's 1,000 things I wish I was better at. So it's almost just seems like a fun exercise to be careful about something when the whole world's going to hell, you know, but just like, managing that. And then I think I'm learning like this creative practice where I just do want to keep like organizing my stash, using it, getting rid of it, not hoarding it, not getting super greedy about it. I'll always keep some things in the closet as a sacred stash. That's who I am.
The secret power. I love that when you called it that.
I'm like a dragon. Like, I feel like that's my inheritance. That's my treasure. That's my battery. You know, you'll just find this like weird bag of things in the closet. Like if that's the least amount of problems I do in the world, that's good. yeah, so it really, I wrote some other things, but I felt really reflective of it. And I also felt like looking back on quilting, I mean, I think quilting in a way is a retreat into something that's comfortable. And then I feel like people, you always imagine like somebody else could criticize you, or like this imaginary, I feel like somebody could be like, well, you're just retreating. But I was thinking to this imaginary critique of myself, that it helps me as a person, and it helps me connect with other people. And I kind of need that. And sometimes I think we need these simple ways that we can engage in a collective kind of way, because that would make us stronger anyway, within the systematic oppression that we are in and we're a part of. But it's kind of like, I don't know, it's something I think we need support just to stay alive or be alive or something like that. And so for me, that practice is helping that. And I do think that's important. Like that's not a retreat into like a soft or nice practice away from the world. It's something helping me stay in the world. And I was thinking about maybe an example of that, of just something I just learned a couple days ago. You could see it like the hashtag, like quilts for Palestine. There's a big, people have always made quilts to raise money and to do things. And I just learned about like the quilts for Palestine. And I can't remember the person who's coordinating it, but if you look at that hashtag, you will see. And I thought maybe that's a little something good to say right now, because I know everybody is doing a lot of things today, and it's a concern. So anyway, that was just like a small thing I want to share. So I think I actually everything on my list to say.
I think you're really onto something about collective care as well. If you look at another hashtag to look at is the Trans Euphoria quilt, which has had blocks being contributed from all over the queer universe about gender, into one place. And I know there's another one where everybody's doing bear paw claws and sending it all into one central source. So yeah, you're absolutely onto something. I think there's also some of us, like, we're very different quilters, but we have a lot of similarities. And I want to ask about one of those in a question, which is, we're both writers. We love writing. We're writer. We write. So I guess kind of just a bold-ish question to you. Where do you find similarities and differences in your writing practice with your quilting practice? Are they the same at all for you?
Oh, that's a good one. I feel like I'm a very tortured writer. Writing feels hard. And quilting feels joyful and easy to me. And so the similarity is the story, the line, the way I quilt, the way I doodle, the way I write. I can see a line that's running through it. And it's a practice. I often talk about quilting in my writing. Like in Revolutionary Mothering, there's a part of a chapter where I was talking about this book being a quilt, because I really strong, like the anthology of voices.
Yeah.
So I feel when I'm writing, I build it bit by bit any way I can, just like a quilt. But writing being my first aim in life, and maybe because it's mental too, like much I have a hard time saying out loud, and then I struggle with it to write it. But the same things that I feel and I can't say, I can quilt in a more soft, gentle, just joyful. I'm surprised. I'm like, this just makes me happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so interesting to me that you had quilting as a construct within your book that you wrote well before you had finished quilt. I really am loving this idea. And I also love that, not dissimilar to one of my favorite drag artists, Sasha Velour, who just put out her book. She's in a beautiful tailored quilt that her great-grandmother made, and they then turned it into a dress. And right at the beginning of her book, she talks a lot about how her life, Sasha Velour as a drag artist, was created like a quilt. and then so was her book. So it's so kind of neat that that metaphor pops up for so many different creatives and artists in other places.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it, love it, love it. We're just seeing a commenting here that there was a college professor read it aloud to the class from Radical Mothering, just as a treat on a day when we all seem tired and in the need of something nice. Is an incredibly warm and awesome comment. And I can't wait to read your book. I have never been a parent, but I'm looking forward to it. I guess I have one last question, and then, because we're at that time, but one last question for you, which is hopes, dreams, resolutions even for 2024. What does next year bring for China?
Wow. Wow. Well, I mean, I have this weird thing I'm thinking about, but it's just really, I don't know. Like, I kind of want to go to Alaska.
Dang!
It all started from a dream. Like, my friend was touring to Alaska, and I told her, and then she said, like, oh yeah, and I don't know, if we do put a book reading, if I put a book reading together in Alaska, like, she would fly there. So it's just this weird thing, but at the same time, it's like, okay, based in non-reality, but I think it's so important to have something to like dream about, even if it doesn't happen, you know, just something, I don't know, like we used to talk about we were going to tour to Russia, and like we never went to Russia. So I was like, oh, Alaska is the new Russia. And I don't even know, I wouldn't want to go to Russia, so I don't even know what that was about. And then, oh, I know one thing I really want to try. I want to try to say, this makes me uncomfortable when I'm around or in a discussion or I'm talking to somebody, and something makes me feel bad, but I can't articulate why. And often I'm scared to say anything because I don't want to make a big fight. And big fights do happen with me and other people in interactions. There's just subjects that feel very delicate, or I don't know. I've noticed I have a tendency, there's things that have really hurt me, and I will smile and say, no problem. And it will take days to figure out that I'm hurt, like almost like a sword in my, and then I'll be like, wait a minute, there's a knife in my heart. And it's like too late to say, you know, like it's too late to say it now. I don't know. It's just a random thought I had. Where
That's like the whole subject of a quilt. Honestly, I feel like that in and of itself is like a topic for a quilt, I think. I love it.
Oh, wow. I could really work it out that way. That's an interesting.
Might be 2024, the year of boundaries for China. China's year of boundaries.
Maybe it's under that topic, but it's just like, I guess it's just a really small step. I just want to locate, it's like a feeling inside. I want to say something for my own benefit, and I probably can't talk it through at the moment. Might not, the person might look at me and be like, what, you feel uncomfortable, you know? But it's like, I feel like I can say that. At least I can, if I can locate it and say it when something hurts me. I don't feel like anybody can really take super offense at that, or it will like, wreck us all.
I love it. Thank you so much. That is awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm going to do a bit of a quilt tour of my studio for y'all, and China's going to ask me a few questions. Then if there is somebody who wants to hit the little button at the bottom and say, add me as a guest, we'll add you as a guest, and you can show us one of your quilts. Thank you so much. I just want to take a moment and just reflect just how awesome that was, China. I just really appreciated learning more about your practice and the thoughtfulness behind it. Forever in admiration of hand sewers. Many of our friends on the Nook, we've talked about the Nook a lot, by the way. The Quilty Nook is Zach Foster's incredible online community. Some folks may know Zach from his incredible work. He is an artist extraordinaire, and we all know each other, or China and I know each other because of the Quilty Nook. So we would shout out to the Quilty Nook, to Zach's podcast team side, and as well to like a bit of our inspiration as well, Softfolk with, because all of these things are about talking about your quilts. And so this is like one of the very first times that I've ever talked about my quilts, which I'm kind of excited about. Like I said earlier, kind of in my introduction, I came to quilting via activism and fretting over the words associated with what was going to go on a banner, and we've only got this many letters, and we've got to paint it, and it's got to get done for tomorrow, and what's reasonable. And then I was always struck and fascinated by the fact that these banners were so ephemeral and they would go away. I'd spend weeks working on the ideas behind them, getting collaborative groups together, creating these materials, and then poof, they're all gone. And then I really started thinking about activism and art and how so much of these things that we create are just for a moment, and what might something look like if it was there for a little bit longer. So I'll show you the first piece. I'm just going to flip over my camera over to this side so y'all can see over here. I'm going to move around my studio with me. Up here is what is called I Was Once a Plant. So I think folks can probably see that. It's a bit of an awkward angle. This one was my March, and a couple of months before that. It's done up in a patchwork style to kind of evoke an agricultural landscape, because it was for my horticulture capstone project. I went back to the University of Guelph in, I guess, 3, 4, 5 years ago now, before the pandemic, just to get a degree in horticulture, because I love collecting degrees, and this was my capstone project. All of the cotton and all of the materials in it are organic, and it was a lot about just demonstrating to the quilting community, the crafting community, that these materials that we use and touch every single day have an incredible impact on our planet, and that almost all of these things that we use in quilting once originated as a plant, but have been through so much chemicalization and manufacturing and human touch that we forget those types of things. So it's just a bit of a touch point to say, hey, if we keep all of these things as a stash or in our collection and we just don't ever use them, then are we really taking that moment to honor the plant that's there? As part of that, I found a 1950s era linen tablecloth, which is what the letters are all made out of, in a long forgotten drawer here in the house that we're in the process, of inheriting. So I wanted to put a bit of that emotional kind of resonance of that in here as well, of a tablecloth that probably hasn't been used for, heavens, almost probably since this house was bought in the 50s or 60s. It just kind of got forgotten. And I often kind of think about that, like how many other tablecloths and items and linens and other things have been forgotten. Yeah, that leads me to the next two pieces that I took on this year. Well, I just finished Gay as well, but it chronologically was in, I'll just grab a photo here to show you all, but chronologically it was next after I Was Once a Plant. This is a reproduction of a 1971 protest photo, a protest sign, sorry, from the 1971 We Demand protest in Ottawa under our Parliament Hill. And that was the very first time that gay men and women in Canada came together. And this sign, Gay as Love, was held by a friend, a colleague, a person that I know quite well, and I've now applicated to this piece, which has got some kind of baby quilting on it, and I used a projector to get it exactly right. And I'm going to be creating about, I think 5 or 6 or 7 more of these pieces that kind of replicate and reproduce protest banners that used to exist in the world, and bring them back to life and sort of say, hey, maybe this is the first time that physical embodiment of that idea has been around and alive in, maybe 50 plus years. Take a Risk is right beside it, and I'm going to show you something else here, see if it kind of works with some media pop up. But this is just photo. You can see this little thing right here on the brick wall. Says Take a Risk, step out of the spotlight, is in a theater crossover at my former high school in Edmonton, Alberta. And for theater kids, they know that there's traditions in lots of schools and theater companies that when you leave, and if you've made a contribution to that space, they let you paint a little bit of something there on the wall. And there I was, and I wrote, Take a Risk, step out of the spotlight. I put the glitter right there around it. I don't know if you all, oh, there we go, that's easier. You can all see it there. There's colors, and then I wanted to replicate it, to remind myself as I was hitting my 40s that my younger self had a lot of good advice. Take a Risk, step out of the spotlight was a message to myself as a child actor that, when you went to that theater school, I decided to not be on the stage all the time. I decided to get into communications and public relations, and that served me really, really well. And then about 8 years ago, or 5, 6 years ago, I made another huge step out of the spotlight when I gave up my TV career. So this is a reminder to me and my family and everybody else that it's okay to take a risk and give up the things that perhaps seemed impossible otherwise to give up. So that's a bit about those banners. You'll see banners. I'm back. Banners are a huge part of my practice. I love putting words on quilts. I think that's maybe part of why I love Zach's work so much, because it's got lots of words on quilts. But then I took a radical departure here to this one. This is the gore you know. So I'll show folks here, kind of just a bit of a close-up of it first. It's a matchstick quilting, some diamonds in there. It gives you just a bit of a peek into my process, which is I'm a machine quilter, and I don't use particularly many bits and small pieces. When I was attempting to play with some shapes, here, right back here, so it's so pretty folks can see it. Back here. I found these triangle shapes, so that's why I'm showing this one off, because it's a study. It's called the gore you know. Those shapes are called the gore, and I only know that because of the quilting. The shape fascinated me, and it has absolutely fascinated me. So did the various styles of quilting that I put into this one. So I really thought about how could I create the beginning of a series with the gore you know, because I really felt it was about that learning curve and that growth curve that China was talking about, like how my skills have progressed to the point where I can now put something like this together and it doesn't fall apart when I put it in the washing machine, and I don't have to follow a pattern anymore, which was a huge moment for me this year over the course of the past little while. Prior to this, all of my quilts, all of the things that I made on a machine needed a pattern. They needed to be perfect as I could possibly make them. And I feel like that's a huge departure, which lands me to this one, which I'll show you folks just briefly here, which is the Red Cape of Life. And the Red Cape of Life is a similar set of patterns with gores. It's a little bit looser in the quilting than the gore you know, because I wanted it to be a cape. And this one really is meant to be worn on your back. It's currently pinned to my design wall, because when I was building it and creating it, I often have my husband here in the studio with me, and I put it on him and it just looked so cool. So I discovered that this idea of a cape is really fascinating to me, and it's been explored by lots of different artists over the years. And in this particular one, it started off the color series that I'm currently working on, which is the Progress Pride color series. Here in my studio, above me, at all times is my Progress Pride flag, done by an artisan in the first year that it was around, from San Francisco, because I don't know sewing skills like that still. It's pretty impressive work. And I was just fascinated by these colors and how I could extrapolate these colors and bring them back into their original symbolic meaning. When Gilbert Baker created the original Pride flag with 8 colors, he assigned a meaning to each and every one of them. And I think even queer folks, we forget that, or we don't know that. So I had this sort of thought, an idea, what would happen if I bought enough fabric to make enough quilts to honor every single one of those colors that's currently in the Progress Pride flag. So I'm on red was the first one, the gore you know was the study, and here on the working table over here, we've got blue. And that's what I've been up to. That's been my year.
Oh,
yeah.
My gosh. It's a big year for you.
It was. Yeah. And that's only about half. I think I produced 12 finalized projects, 12 quilts this year. Yeah. I had some other quilts that I sent off for ceremonies and other things. I just chose these ones because they happen to be with me right now. Most of my quilts and things that I make, they go away fast, they leave, but these ones are going to stay with me for a while. And that'll be the big difference with this series. I'll keep all of the color series with me here until they're all done, so you can see what they all look like together. And then they're going to go to people individually that I think need that quilt, or who I've been really thinking about while I'm making that quilt. But I think they may find a place to be exhibited first before and send them to those folks, or have those folks as part of that giveaway, have them with me, take photos of them, and extend that artistic practice back into something that I love, which is photography. So that's what I'm up to.
Okay, well, Ian, I took a lot of notes, and I actually feel like I have so many questions for you. Already channeled the questions I'm going to ask you maybe another time, you know, because I'm glad we're going to keep doing this show because, yeah, now I have 1,000 questions about you. Your capes are incredible. Your banners, I loved hearing the stories of everything. It kind of made me think, like, when you came to the Nook the first time, you posted a picture of the plant, like this was a or exactly what it said, and I loved it so much. And it takes me a long time to associate sometimes somebody's work with their face, like in a sewing or somebody, you know, it's like the work. So this, I think what we're doing is a good idea because it's to hear more stuff behind the scenes. My actually some of my questions to you, there's one technical one, and then there's three basic ones that I would like to ask. And then, like I say, keeping those even more questions for another day. Okay, maybe I'll say all the questions at once, even though that seems like a bad idea and you can figure them out. But I want to ask you about, actually, the same question you asked me, because I didn't know that you were a writer, and I think that's really interesting. And I like how a lot of your quilts do have words on them. So I was curious for you to answer the question about writing and quilting. That was one. Other stuff was kind of basic. Like, I want to know when you started.
Here, why don't we do that? Let's do that one first.
Okay.
So I don't forget. Okay, let's do that one first.
Thanks.
I asked it because I was so fascinated, because I see it very much like writing, patchwork especially, and improv, very much like the way that I write, which is, I think about if I had to do long form writing, I would never have been able to do it. But because I have a word processor, because I have a computer, I'm able to copy, paste, drag, drop. Does this work here? Does it not work here? I can audition things, and it's not permanent. Versus when I went to university, we were just in that, like, switch over to computer zone. And I honestly was very sad for some of my professors and other students who had to, like, typewriters. I was like, oh, you can't change much. That's terrible. So I do see it like that, but I'm also a ghostwriter. So I write for other people, not in my own voice most of the time. I write speeches. I write for, right now I write for a corporate group. Before I was in politics, so I did a lot of that work. So it was also about collecting bits and pieces from all those people. So, like, when you're writing a speech for a well-known politician, say, it's never about just what that person wants to say. It's about what his policy advisor wants to say, what the press office wants them to say, maybe a little bit about even what he wants to say or they want to say, rarely. So you've got to kind of make a series of compromises. And especially with something like I Was Once a Plant, I felt like that one, for instance, is a series of little artistic compromises, what looks best beside other things, so on and so forth. So yeah, in that way I find writing very similar, at least in my practice. So, yeah. I feel like I'm always stitching together words that shouldn't quite possibly be together. And then when they are, they kind of, oh, okay, that works. Not what I was expecting, but it works, I hope.
I think this is fascinating, and it's quite by accident that we're both writers. And now that conversation, I can definitely both see us as writers in our quilting. Where, yeah. Oh, you just explained to me the kind of things that you write, and I'm like, yeah, that I can see that. And that's really cool. The technical question is, I want to know how you do some of those organic shapes, because you have a different kind of style or mastery, and but sometimes I try to get outside of the bounds. Like, I love circles, and I don't always like the square box of a quilt, and I try to do different shapes, and they never work at all anywhere near the way some of your pieces have these, like, wild lines, like the piece behind you. Like, can you tell us anything about shapes?
So the shapes are gores, which is like a triangle that's narrower on the end than it is at the top. They're typically inserted into dress forms. So, for instance, if you have a skirt, you can insert gores and shapes. Other people are way more informed about this than I am. I made a stupid accident. So here, full admission, I tried to make HST, like a half triangle square trick. You know how you make a trick? You put two of them face to face, and then you sew two sides, you cut them, and you open it up, and you have two. Well, it turns out that does not work if you make a rectangle, obviously, because geometry. But I don't know geometry very well.
No.
But I know how to play with it, I guess, because I saw this shape, and I was like, well, that's a cool shape. And I was desperately trying to keep my mouth shut during a sewing circle with Zach, because there's lots of people, and I was just like, you can just focus, be behave, don't talk too much.
Yeah.
And I made more of these gore shapes, and I was like, what is this crazy shape? And what I've always loved to do with all of my quilting work is like kind of repetition, like do the same thing over and over again. So how I achieve this is they're gores that are stacked upside down on one another. So just using kind of like generally kind of like principles of design, like that makes it kind of even, it balances it. And then I seek to unbalance it as best as I can with a color or an alternate choice, break up that line somehow, and then keep it within a cape-ish shape. I know that sounds weird, but like as best as I can possibly keep it wearable or huggable. Somebody else said that the other day. They said, oh, I don't think that these are capes. I think that these are big hugs. And I'm like, oh, that's really warm and lovely, but I like cape because it's got this power to it that is something slightly different than just a big hug. I think capes can make you hug you too. One last item. I think I'm just like, I think if I just don't know how to do it right, then it comes out better. Because honestly, every time I try and like look up a pattern on a proper how to make something or do it, bad things happen. So if I just trust myself and kind of go, you know what, listen, I can unpick this. Worst that could happen, I'll just cut out the seam. You know, like what's like, okay, so because I'm a machine sewist, right? So, you know, I use a pretty small stitch number because I make nice tight seams, and I don't want to unstitch them all the time. So I'm also just now willing to just slice out the seam. It's just, well, that didn't work. Whoops. You know, so, and that freedom that happened this year was huge for me. Previous to that, it was a lot of like Susie quilt patterns, and like I have a whole book of patterns over here that I absolutely love and that I can whip up, and you know, it didn't have that same movement, that same excitement, that same feeling. So honestly, I do have to give a huge amount of credit again to Zach Foster and the Quilty Nook, and especially like the Mystery Quilt Race and the Quilt Jam, and you know, any time where there's a certain amount of expectation and you're just going to go with whatever he says you were going to do, and we're going to do it quickly. That level of urgency got me to, I think, a point where I could just pull together a top relatively quickly. And I guess one last element is, I think for me, the real magic comes in the quilting. So as much as I like making the tops, and that kind of this compositional thing is fun, and it's kind of, and people are like, oh, it's very color field, and yeah, all of those things. I find it's the texture, you know, I'll just bring you closer. Like I like this part of it. Like part of the reason I'm doing it with the type of fabric that I've chosen now and is to create that crinkly, homely kind of feeling. Mm-hmm. Well, I want that kind of like, oh yeah, that feels like a quilt. Like it's, you know, so making sure that quilting is really, you know, channel quilting is tight enough and makes that effect happen when I stick it in the washing machine, versus some of my other stuff like banners, you put in the washing machine. So that's also brand new to me. This whole like, how does like the quilting and the washing experience that differently than, you know, a banner, which just kind of needs to be rolled up and stuck on a metro, and you know, again, somebody junks it or sticks it in a warehouse for others.
So would you say some of your choices are intuitive then? Because like there's a lot of skills that you've been learning, but then how you said that you prefer it sometimes when you don't know what you're doing and you just jump in, or even where you're just like, oh, I want to make this cape-like, you know, the shape is cape-like, and it's like, so that is just a intuitive feeling that you feel comfortable with, that you're just
and years of art directing. So I owned an agency for a long time. I worked with a lot of designers. I'm a former graphic designer. So there's that training that exists in my brain. I'm, you know, about color theory and what should and shouldn't work together. Those types of things live in my brain. I am also really comfortable correcting other artists and creatives, having worked with so many of them for so many years. I'm a collector, and I love art and I love artists. And when artists ask me their opinion, I want to give it to you, like gently, kindly, if that's what you need, or not, if that's also what you need, like particularly as it relates to saleability, collectability, construction. You know, these are things I'm passionate about as a person. So when it came to my own practice, I guess that's a big sort of admission, is like I never really saw myself as an artist before this year. I saw myself as an art director, an
Oh.
interior decorator, person who enjoys aesthetics and is aesthetically pleasing. I dress and do funky other artistic and performance things, but never as an artist. So that's a big switch for me this year. Whoa, okay. Sure, I can do that. Why not?
Okay, so the last thing I want to know, where I said it's kind of a basic question, but that's not bad. It's just like, I want to know, when did you start quilting and what brought you to quilting?
Yeah. Officially started quilting. It's like the pandemic started. Like everybody, like the, oh my God, what are we gonna do with our lives? I got a little tiny Singer machine, the little like rickety one, because I recognized that from every backstage I've ever been in. Like it's the cheapest Singer machine you can buy. I think it's because like actors and performers and things knock shit over so much. Like it's just this. So I was like, I know how to that one I know how to do. And I started sewing random little things to be useful. I thought, oh, I need to be useful. I don't know. I think everybody had that kind of like drive at that moment to like, what do I do? So I'd sew like zipper cases. I have one here. It's so funny. I would sew like little, like just like little. I didn't know zippers were hard, so I started with zippers. That was not a good idea, but I did it. And then I was like, what is useful? What else is useful? What do I do? Quilts, blankets are useful. Like my family has a history of making like crocheted blankets and beautiful blankets, and we've got quilts. And it's like, oh yeah, well that's duh. So I started doing those, and yeah, that's what brought me to it, was I guess comfort. I mean, maybe like a lot of people during that sort of this pandemic kind of trauma stacking time, we're all looking for maybe something to kind of comfort us. And I think quilts is like a natural touch point. The other thing I think that I've discovered as it relates to my queer art practice now is the AIDS quilt is a huge touch point for me. The idea that I think I grew up in this moment, as you know, I'm 43 now, so I am a kid of the AIDS generation, and I think I grew up always subconsciously and very consciously at some point being aware of the American Names Project, the AIDS quilt, and then the Canadian version of it, the UK version of it. And it was digitized a number of years ago, and I can recall myself at that moment just being absolutely obsessed with queer iconography and symbols, and how we as a queer community identify ourselves to others. You know, so that like the red ribbon is up there, but then also how we identify to one another. You know, flagging with hanky codes, all of these other things. It's like a lot of fun stuff. But then the AIDS quilt, you kind of as a piece of material culture, you continually come back to it because it's so poignant and it's so massive and it's in its scale. It asks us fundamentally to challenge the notion of what a quilt is, and I love that. Because, you know, you all see my post in the Quilting Nook. All quilts are hashtag all quilts are valid.
Yeah.
Like a quilt doesn't need to have 3 layers. That's bullshit. It doesn't need to be from a pattern, all of those sorts of things. So yeah, that's my real message. And I think that is really informed by the Names Project, the AIDS quilt. And I have to name and just lift up that project wouldn't have been possible without the incredible work of Black women quilters, Black women crafters, who are already challenging the form of what quilting is. You know, so like the Names Project and the AIDS quilt could not exist, again, without the civil rights movement, without all of those women whose shoulders that quilt stands on. That wouldn't have had the resonance as a quilt hadn't it been for all of that emotional labor and work that went into it. And then the idea that it could be a quilt, i.e. break out of the very form of points and so on and so forth. You know, we absolutely have to always lift up Black women quilters from America and other places who challenged this form well before I came along to challenge it.
I'm not sure if anything. It's like I was going to say something and I can hear what I'm going to say and then I start to criticize it. But my gut response is like, I don't think anything good in the USA is possible without Black women. You know?
Yeah, agreed.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. What?
Is there anybody out there who wants to share a quilt? Has questions? I think we're just learning Insta Live here, but if you do have a quilt that you want to share,
or
we're here.
on
Or a
your
reflection.
hearing,
Or yeah, you don't even have to share a quilt, just your reflection on your gear.
or
If anybody knows how to do that, they could teach other people. Currently, there's a button at the bottom where you invite yourself, and then I see it on my side. This was fun, Dinah. We're gonna do this again.
Yes, we are totally going to do this again. I mean, this was just a rough, I feel like we're doing so good for being so completely rough. It's like, I have a makeup, a thing where you look in it. Oh, I'll show you this ridiculous stand I made. Like, so it's like a 70s makeup thing on a cat post, right? So like that's my center, and
Yes. I love
like
it.
I'm a slow.
The lighting's working very well. It's beautiful. It worked. I'm happy. You're happy.
I'm happy. Yeah. I'm like,
for those who are not there, China came up with this idea 2 days ago in a Quilty Nook sewing circle. We just whipped it up and had some fun, and practicing talking about quilts is important. Practicing talking about your art is important, I've discovered. To verbalize it, to get it out there, I think makes it even more real. Plus, I think with my tongue. That's me. So.
That's why it's great to co-host with you. I don't feel like talking is a strong suit of mine, but I do want to show up and say things. And lately, I'm really thinking also about. Oh, never mind. See, now I'm going to be sidetracked. I was thinking about people who communicate in different ways who don't speak, and because I've been talking to somebody about how you don't get as much attention reading somebody type out what they want to say, and so just thinking about the privilege of talking privilege, or I don't know, it might be a different word anyway, but I think my brain's direction.
This has been so awesome. I really, really appreciate it. I'm seeing some wonderful comments in the chat as well from Anat and from others. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So warm and wonderful. Oh, I have an angry dog who's barking. Yeah.
Can we see the messages later? I can't keep up with them all, so I just wonder,
Yeah. Say it again, sorry?
Do you know that when we stop this, can we still read the messages, or are they?
Yeah, we will. Yeah, all the messages and everything are still there for us. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thanks. Because I can't. Yeah. I haven't been keeping up with them. And so
that's no worries. I had a social media agency for years. I'm pretty used to it. Although I did have to relearn the whole Instagram Live interface for today. I think we're going to be able to wrap it up there. I'm not seeing too many. I don't see any requests to join us on the screen, but I am seeing lots of incredible comments. Thank you, Kat. Thank you, others. This has been so much fun and so awesome, and I truly appreciate all of your reflections and ideas and thoughts. I think we'll end it here, and we will make an announcement maybe on our Instagram and in the Nook as to when the next one is. And careful, I see who's watching us here. We're going to book you in as guests because I want to learn more about everybody's practice as well.
Try to grab people.
Yeah. Thank you all. Thank you all so much. It has been an absolutely fantastic time.
Do you have a last word?
Yeah. Let's do it.
It's okay.
Please. Yes, of course.
Yeah. Because I want this moment to reflect. And one thing that I did reflect of the last year of something that's really important to me is, I gotta find the person's name, Nicole of my affirmation project. She sends out postcards. Let's see, is it? Can you read that?
Yeah, your existence is beautiful.
Yeah, this is the latest postcard.
Yeah.
Affirmation project. I learned about it on the Nook, and you can sign up and get postcards, and she does billboards and stuff, and this just really spoke to me. I signed up for free postcards, but I always forget that they're there, and they're in the mail, and you read them. It's your existence is beautiful. It's just that kind of message, and I just want it to be really visible as a person who struggles with depression and has had suicide in my life, in my family's life. And I know Nicole does these affirmation messages it came out of that her father had was suicide. Look, I can't talk. So it's really meaningful to me, and so I just wanted to say thank you, Nicole, and thank you everybody for getting through this year. Like,
yes,
just getting through this year. It's like
no
quilts, nothing. And I hope you have a happy New Year's.
Y'all are awesome. Thank you so much. We will, again, we'll post more info. We'll do this again. We're going to find guests, and it'll be amazing. And we're going to talk more about our quilts that we're making. And if you have ideas or you want to join us, feel free to send us, either one of us, an Instagram DM or a little note on the Nook. And one last item, last shout out to the Nook. Y'all are awesome. We would be nowhere without our sewing circle friends and without Zach and the whole folks there. So if you don't know what the Nook is, send us a note and we'll send you the free trial link. You can join the Nook. It's not an advertisement for the Nook, but it is an advertisement for being less than perfect and being okay with that. And it's a great affirming community for all of these things. So
or check
you.
Zach Foster. Zach Foster, like ZAK. Instagram gives you a real good look of what's going on. It's really, I really super love the Nook. It's really important, and that's a lot of my quilting community. So yes, definitely.
We have some sewing circles still coming up for what's called Nookmas. You don't have to celebrate Christmas or anything. But there are sewing circles there every single day for the next number of days, 12 days after Christmas. And you can visit us in person. And a bunch of the folks who are joined us, our watchers are there as well. And yeah, we'll talk more warm, fuzzy things about quilts.
Yay! We did it!
Yay, we did it! Bye, y'all!